Scooby-Doo 2 is what happens when the people who build a career on proving monsters don't exist have to deal with monsters that actually exist. Their whole brand is the reveal, the unmasking. It was just a guy in a costume all along. Nobody prepared them for the costume being real. A few weeks after the Spooky Island incident, Mystery Inc. attends the grand opening of the Cusonian Criminology Museum. This movie is now 2.5 minutes old and already someone got jazzed on. Crazy. Well, the museum has dedicated an entire exhibit to their solved cases. A group of people whose primary investigative tool is a talking dog now has a wing in a legitimate institution. Nobody seems to find this unusual. The exhibit contains the actual costumes from their previous cases. All the monsters that turned out to be people in rubber suits, now behind glass like trophies. It's a room full of evidence that every scary thing they ever encountered had a zipper. The opening is interrupted by a masked figure, who shows up specifically to announce that Mystery Inc. is finished. Not to steal anything, not to threaten anyone, just to declare their downfall in front of a crowd and leave. It's a villain entrance built entirely on confidence and zero follow-through, which means something is about to follow through. The masked figure doesn't leave empty-handed. The pterodactyl ghost breaks out of his glass box to assist, and together they steal 2 of the costumes from the exhibit. A supernatural creature helping someone steal proof that supernatural creatures don't exist. The irony is doing a lot of heavy lifting and the gang hasn't caught it yet. The masked figure escapes. Mystery Inc. watches. The museum dedicated to their victories had just been robbed at the opening night. A journalist named Heather immediately begins a public smear campaign against Mystery Inc. Because nothing accelerates a reputation crisis like someone with a microphone who has already made up their mind. The gang went from celebrated to suspect in the time it took one masked figure to steal 2 costumes and leave. Shaggy and Scooby blame themselves for not stopping the theft, which is a reasonable reaction, except that their role in every previous case has been to run away from things and accidentally solve the mystery. Expecting them to stop an armed pterodactyl ghost is a new benchmark. They spend some time reflecting on their track record, which is a long list of things that went wrong before accidentally going right. It's a kind of self-assessment that would concern any employee who wasn't already aware that one of them is a dog. They resolved to be better, more useful, more professional members of the team. Shaggy and Scooby have made this decision before. The audience knows this. The movie knows this. Everyone moves on. The rest of the gang notices the change immediately and finds it deeply unsettling. Shaggy and Scooby, acting responsible, reads less like growth and more like a warning signal. The gang work through their list of previously unmasked villains and concludes that someone with a grudge is behind this, which narrows it down to essentially everyone they have ever put in handcuffs. It's a long list. They rule out Dr. Jonathan Jacobo early. He attempted the prison escape. It went badly, and he is presumed dead, which is a mystery in the narrative equivalent of a neon sign that nobody in the room can see. That leaves Jeremiah Wickles on the shortlist, former Black Knight ghost, former cellmate of Jacobo, and the kind of person who comes up immediately when you ask who might want revenge. The connection to a dead man they just dismissed is noted by nobody. They go to his mansion, immediately fall through a trapdoor into a cage built specifically for unwelcome guests, and escape using Daphne's makeup kit, because apparently that's a more reliable security bypass than anything else in this franchise. Inside, they find a grimoire belonging to Jacobo, the man they ruled out 20 minutes ago because he was dead. Dead man's book in a living man's house. The gang files this under interesting and continues. The grimoire contains instructions for creating actual monsters using a combination of black magic and mad science, which reframes the entire case. The stolen costumes weren't trophies, they were blueprints. So basically, movie science. Shaggy and Scooby find an invitation to somewhere called the Fox Ghost, which is a nightclub, and which someone in this mansion was apparently attending regularly. Former villain with a grudge against Mystery Inc. was spending his evenings at a club named after fake monsters. Nobody asked why yet. Before they can process any of that, the Black Knight ghost shows up and attacks them. The same costume that was unmasked and put in a museum is now functional and aggressive, which means the grimoire isn't theoretical. Someone has already started the process. They get out, the Black Knight ghost does not follow, which is either a limitation of the spell or the villain making a point. Either way, Mystery Inc. is back outside with more questions than they arrived with, and the grimoire they probably should not have touched. Shaggy and Scooby go to the Fox Ghost, undercover, which in practice means disguised thin enough that anyone paying attention would see through immediately. They are counting on nobody paying attention, which has historically been a reliable bet. Inside, they track down Wickles and question him directly, which is a bold move for 2 people whose master plan was a disguise that wouldn't survive a second glance. Wickles tells them he's out of the villain business entirely. Reformed, retired, done. It's a kind of claim that would be reassuring if it wasn't coming from a man with a dead criminal's book in his mansion and a fresh alibi ready to go. The disguise holds up for exactly as long as disguises in this franchise ever do, which is not very long. The other patrons figure out who they are almost immediately, and Shaggy and Scooby go from undercover investigators to 2 guys standing in a nightclub in bad costumes with nowhere to go. They get out before it turns into anything worse than embarrassment, which by their standards count as a clear exit. Back with the group, Velma pores over the grimoire and identifies randomium as a required ingredient for the spell. A substance that sounds invented because it almost certainly is, which apparently didn't stop the plot from needing it. Velma traces the randomium to the old silver mines, which is exactly the kind of location that exists in this town for no reason other than a plot requiring an abandoned mine eventually. Fred, Daphne and Velma head back to the museum, this time with the curator Patrick Wisely, someone whose job now involves both preserving monster history and apparently getting pulled into it. They arrive to find every remaining costume in the exhibit gone. Not 2 this time, all of them. Whoever is behind this has stopped being selective. Patrick decides this is the moment to go investigate on his own, without a group, without a plan, and without any indication that this has ever worked out well for anyone in the history of this franchise. Fred, Daphne and Velma head to the silver mines and confront Wiggles, directly, betting that the man with the dead criminals book and the suspicious retirement story might actually be involved. Wiggles explained he's actually there to reopen the mines as an amusement park, not a monster factory, not a revenge plot, a theme park. It's the most disappointing possible explanation and also, technically, an alibi. They also learned Wiggles hated Jacobo, which undercuts the cellmate theory entirely. Sharing a cell doesn't make you allies, it just makes you neighbors. Between the amusement park story and the fact that he apparently despises the man they suspected him of working with, Fred, Daphne and Velma cross Wiggles off the list, which means the actual culprit is still out there and their break at 0. The gang regroups with Shaggy and Scooby at a place called the Monster Hive, which is not a name that suggests anything good is happening inside. Inside, they find the actual machine, the thing turning stolen costumes into functioning physical monsters. Not magic in the abstract sense Velma read about in a book, an actual device, doing an actual thing, sitting in a room somewhere. The grimoire wasn't a metaphor, it was a manual. Shaggy and Scooby find the control panel and predictably start pressing things they shouldn't. The machine activates. Nobody is surprised, least of all the audience. Multiple costumes convert at once. The room that a minute ago held empty rubber suits now holds several fully functioning monsters. All newly created, all immediately hostile, all in the same building as Mystery Inc. In the middle of it, someone manages to rip the control panel of this machine, cutting off whatever was still in progress. It's not a solution, it's a pause button. Mystery Inc. gets out of the Monster Hive with the control panel in hand, which is the first tangible win they've had all movie. Assuming a building full of newly created monsters counts as something you can leave behind and call solved. With the machine disabled, the mask figure sends the monsters already created out into Coolsville itself. What was contained inside one building is now the entire town's problem. And Mystery Inc. is the only group that knows why. They retreat to the old high school clubhouse, the place where all this technically started. To regroup, which under the circumstances count as strategy. Wilma figures out the control panel can be reprogrammed by rewiring it, which means the same machine that made the monsters can theoretically be used to undo them. It's a kind of solution that only works in a movie where a talking dog is also on the payroll. Captain Cutler's ghost rises out of the nearby lake, a face from an earlier case. Back and apparently no longer just a guy in a costume either. The gang heads back to the silver mines to reinstall the modified control panel into the machine, which means walking straight back into the one place they have already fled from once tonight. They split up to draw the monsters away from the machine, which is the exact decision every horror movie has ever warned against, and the exact decision this movie needs to keep moving. Shaggy and Scooby take the control panel and head for the Monster Hive, which puts the 2 least reliable members of the team in charge of the one object and the entire plan depends on. While the others are occupied, Wilma finds a shrine dedicated to Jacobo. Candles, photos, the kind of dedication that goes well past professional respect. Somebody in the story has been mourning a man everyone else assumed was just a dead criminal. Wilma puts it together. Patrick Wisely, the curator, the one who conveniently wandered off to investigate alone, puts every piece that's been sitting unused. The shrine, the access to the museum, the timing. She's fairly certain she knows who's behind the mask. Before she can act on any of that, a catwalk collapses beneath her, and Patrick is the one who catches her, which is either a coincidence or exactly the kind of thing a guilty person does to look innocent at precisely the right moment. Moments after saving her, Patrick gets snatched by the pterodactyl ghost and carries off, which complicates Velma's theory considerably. It's difficult to be the mastermind while also being actively kidnapped. Everyone converges on the Monster Hive at once. The gang, the mask figure, and every monster is still operational. Whatever this mystery has been building toward is about to happen in this one room. The tar monster gets to them before they get to anything useful, and again ends up captured, which is not the position anyone wants to be in during the last act of their own mystery. The tar monster starts closing in, and for a movie built on rubber suits and misdirection, this is the first moment where the threat doesn't feel like a costume at all. Scooby grabs a fire extinguisher and blasts the tar monster back, which is either quick thinking or muscle memory from every previous case, ending exactly like this. Either way, it works. Scooby gets the control panel reconnected and switches it on, running the reprogrammed sequence Velma built back at the clubhouse. If the rewiring worked, this is the moment that proves it. The monsters revert back into what they always technically were. Empty costumes, no longer moving. No longer a threat. The room that was full of danger a moment ago is now full of rubber suits again. They pull off the mask. It's Heather, the journalist who spent the entire movie publicly tearing them apart, doing it from the inside while positioning herself as the loudest critic. The smear campaign wasn't coverage, it was a cover. They then pull off a second mask underneath the first. Heather Jesby Howie was never real. It's Jacobo, alive, not dead, not defeated by a failed prison break, just very committed to a decade-long disguise. The man they ruled out in the first 10 minutes was in the room the entire time, wearing someone else's face. Jacobo explains the fake death wasn't even intentional. The prison escape went wrong, everyone assumed he was dead, and rather than correct the error, he simply let the assumption do the work for him. Everything since has been building towards one goal: revenge against Mystery Inc. for every case they've ever solved, every mask they ever pulled off, every time his kind of career got interrupted by a group of teenagers and a dog. The Wickles angle wasn't a coincidence either. Jacobo set him up deliberately. The grimoire in this mansion, the connection to the Fox Ghost, all of it planted to point Mystery Inc. toward a man who had nothing to do with any of it. Jacobo is arrested. The decade of hiding, the disguise, the elaborate revenge plot, all of it ends with him in handcuffs, which is exactly where every villain in this franchise eventually ends up. Mystery Inc. gets their reputation back in the same public, instant way they lost it. One press cycle turns them from suspects into heroes again, as if the smear campaign never happened. Brad and Daphne also end the movie together, romantically, which the film treats as a natural conclusion despite spending 0 prior minutes building toward it. Velma and Patrick end up together too, which at least has the benefit of a shrine, a kidnapping and a January rescue behind it. More setup than Fred and Daphne got, even if none of it was intentional courtship. Shaggy and Scooby end the movie exactly where they started. Unreliable, easily distracted, and somehow the ones who saved everyone anyway. The confidence they spent the whole movie trying to build wasn't the point. They never needed it. The gang closes out the case the way they close out every case. Together, unbothered, celebrating at the Fox Ghost. A club named after exactly the kind of thing they've just spent the movie proving was real. So after watching the mystery gang fight a museum full of monsters, we're moving on to a movie where the biggest threat is waking up on the same Tuesday forever.
Well, yeah, that wraps up that awfully long movie. Hope you enjoyed and let me know what movie you want to see in the future. Alright, that's it for now. If you like this disaster of a recap, feel free to click some buttons, or don't. I'm not your dad, so that YouTube knows that my videos are worth watching. Thanks again, and see you in the next one. Bye!